The regular season of college football is over. We have Army-Navy this weekend, we have bowl games the next week, and then we have the college football playoffs soon after or implemented during the bowl season. And while there's a lot I'm excited for with the college football playoffs, there's also some major flaws that I'm pretty sure almost everyone has seen at this point. And I personally have two ideas on how you could possibly fix the college football playoffs to make the whole 12 seeding more fair and more entertaining. But that's for a different video coming next week, so keep an eye on that if you're interested. But today we have one thing to talk about, and that is the Heisman Trophy. The Heisman is coming out this weekend, and we have our 4 finalists, but let's be honest, it's a 2-man race. No offense to Cam Ward, no offense to Dylan Gabriel, but you're not even in the same conversation this year. The Heisman Trophy will either be going to Ashton Jeanty, running back out of Boise State, or dual-sided player Travis Hunter out of Colorado. And in this video, I'm not only going to talk about who I think should win it, I'm going to be giving you the case for both players so that you can have more knowledge on it. Maybe you haven't really looked into what both players are doing. Maybe you're undecided yourself. Maybe you just want to have more information to have discussion with your friends on why you think your opinion is right and why their opinion is wrong. So let's break into both of their cases. So first, talking about Ashton Jeanty. Jeanty leads the country in rushing attempts, rushing yards, and total touchdowns. He has 30 total touchdowns on the year. The Army running back has 29, so he's actually extremely close, but Jeanty crushes him in yards. Jeanty has averaged 7.3 yards per carry. Only 4 players in all of college football have averaged over 7 yards per carry this year, with over 1,000 rushing yards, and he's over 2,000. Jeanty is having arguably the second greatest season of any running back ever, and he's doing it in a era where passing is a lot more common, where defenses are a lot smarter. He looks absolutely incredible. And one of my favorite Jeanty stats to show just how dominant he's been, Jeanty currently has 2,497 rushing yards. This is after the conference championship games. Second place, or second most yards, is Amarian Hampton, the running back out of UNC. Phenomenal athlete. He has 1,660. So obviously Jeanty is almost 1,000 yards in front of him, which is incredible by itself. But that's not the stat. My favorite stat is Jeanty's yards after contact is almost 1,900. Jeanty almost has 300 more rushing yards after the first contact than Hampton does for the whole season. Jeanty is making people miss, he's breaking tackles, he's explosive, he has just been dominating, and he's led Boise State to a only 1-loss season, and that one loss was a 3-point loss to the team who's still number 1 overall, Oregon. Now let's compare Jeanty to the last 4 running backs who have won the Heisman, because I think that's a good place to start. Let's see how he's comparing seasons-wise. So the most recent was Derrick Henry, I think we all know who that is, who ran for 1,986 yards on 339 attempts for 5.9 yards per carry and 23 touchdowns. He didn't really add anything in the air at all, so I didn't even include that for him. Then a few years before that, Mark Ingram had 1,542 yards. He added 279 in the air. He had 18 total touchdowns, 249 attempts, giving him a 6.2 yards per carry. Reggie Bush, who was the most efficient of the group, but obviously he had a split backfield during those USC years. He was able to bring in 1,658 rushing yards, 383 receiving yards, 15 rushing touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns for 17 total. He only did it on 187 yards, 8.9 average. And then Ron Dane out of Wisconsin had 2,034 yards He also didn't really add anything in the air like Henry. 20 touchdowns, 337 attempts, and 60 yards per carry. So here's the thing. Out of the last 4, none of them crossed 2,000 yards. Gentry has 2,500. None of them passed 25 touchdowns. Gentry has 30 total. And only one of them had over 7 yards per carry. And that's Reggie Bush, who was extremely efficient. So Gentry dominated all of these former Heisman running backs in their respective stats. But here's the thing though, not every great running back wins the Heisman. So I do think it is worth looking back at the last 4 best seasons we've gotten from college football running backs who didn't win the Heisman. Now this is subjective on who the best 4 seasons are, but I think if you really look back at it, these are pretty much the consensus. So Jonathan Taylor had 2,000 yards on the ground, 253 receiving, 26 total touchdowns, 6.3 yards per carry on 320 carries. Rashard Penny, who is arguably one of the best comparisons for Gentry because he plays in the same conference as Gentry right now, so very similar competition. So Penny had 2,248 yards, 135 in the air, 25 total touchdowns, 289 carries, 7.8 yards per attempt. Melvin Gordon, who had the best season out of all of these running backs we've gone over so far, had 2,587 yards on the ground, 153 through the air, 29 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving, so he had 32 total touchdowns, and he had a 7.5 yards per carry attempt. And then Monte Ball, these Wisconsin running backs were just dominating for so long. Monte Ball had just under 2,000 yards on the ground, but he had 300 in the air. He had 39 total touchdowns, and he had 307 attempts for a 5.1 average. He wasn't as much of a explosive back, but he was a bruiser, as you can kind of see with that touchdown mark, and not as many break-off runs. But looking at these 4 running backs, Gentry still stands out overall, but not as much when you look at guys who also missed out on the Heisman. Now looking at guys like Jonathan Taylor, Monte Ball, they didn't have as many yards. Monte had more touchdowns, but Taylor didn't. But they were playing in the Big Ten, so obviously the strength of schedule and their competition was much harder. Even though Boise State did play Oregon, the rest of the schedule was not super strong. Then you look at a guy like Rashard Penny, who had similar yards, a little less, and less touchdowns. So he didn't have as good of a season, but he was also extremely efficient, and he played in the same conference as Gentry. Rashard Penny wasn't even one of the 4 finalists. Now I will say he was 5th in voting, but he wasn't one of the 4 finalists, let alone a Heisman winner coming out of that conference. And then you have Melvin Gordon, who had more yards, more touchdowns, and a better yards per average. And he finished 2nd behind Marcus Mariota. So he was a Heisman finalist, like Gentry should be. I'm not trying to argue he shouldn't be a Heisman finalist. I'm just trying to break down, we've compared him to the Heisman winners, and he actually beat all of them. But this is just some evidence that not every great running back season like that, not every historical running back season, ends up getting you the Heisman in Melvin Gordon's case. The greatest running back season we've ever gotten was the man himself, Barry Sanders, who most consider to be the greatest running back we've ever seen, even with a short career. So his Heisman year at Oklahoma State, he had 334 attempts, getting 2,628 yards, 37 touchdowns, and a 7.6 average. So this is the gold standard of running back seasons, is Barry Sanders. So obviously, you don't have to match him to be a Heisman winner nowadays, obviously, because we're going to look at the past 4 Heisman winners for running backs. But if you can match Barry Sanders, it should almost be guaranteed you get the Heisman, because that's how good this season was. So looking at Ashton, he had 344 attempts, 2,497 yards on the ground, 116 in the air, and 30 total touchdowns for a 7.3 average. So to be honest, it was extremely close. The touchdowns were obviously a lot less, but 37 touchdowns is insane. the yards are pretty much even. So Genty showed us that that Barry Sanders season is comparable. When talking about Travis's Heisman resume, it's much more complicated and harder to really objectify compared to Genty's because we've never seen anyone play both sides of the ball like this before. He is truly having a unicorn of a season. So we're going to break down his receiving side of it first, then we'll address the cornerback side of it next, and then we'll try to have some conversation about, is it a good enough combination of the two to outlast Genty's historical season? So when it comes to his receiving stats, one of the biggest arguments I see with people on Twitter or comments of TikToks, YouTubes, and trust me, I know the best way to find out what people in the whole country really think is through Twitter comments and TikTok comments. That is where you truly get to see the real people's thoughts. Definitely not just absolute garbage. But people are saying that Travis is a poor receiver and a poor corner. He just plays, it's the snaps aren't stats argument. But here's the thing. He really has been a top 5 in both positions. Here's his wide receiver resume. Right now, he is second in receiving touchdowns. He's first in Power 4 conference. He's fifth in receiving yards, second in Power 4 conference, the Power 4 conference. And he's fifth in total catches, second in Power 4. So not only has he been the best receiver or a top 5 receiver in all of college football, you can make an argument he's been the best or second best receiver in the Power 4 conferences, which again, that holds more weight even if the Big 12 is the weakest of the 4. Now, I know a lot of people will talk about him being force-fed the ball, about Dion and Shador trying to get him the Heisman. And listen, maybe that's the case, but I don't think there's any good evidence for that because he's clearly the best receiver. Yes, did he get targeted a little extra in that last Oklahoma State game than he should have? Probably. But if you look at the top 10 players in catches this year, 8 of the 10 have more targets than Travis. So it's not like he's just getting targeted the ball more than anyone else. No, he's 5th in catches, but he's 8th out of all those guys in targets. So he's actually been very efficient with his targets. In fact, he has 80% of his targets he has caught. Only one player in the entire of college football have higher percentages than that. That's Giles Jackson from Washington with an 81.3%. So he's basically tied for first out of everyone in the country for catch percentage on targets. He also has the second highest NFL passer rating when targeted. Now, is that a weird stat? For sure. But I do think it is important because the higher passer rating a quarterback has indicates how well they're playing. And if one receiver has a higher passer rating when thrown to than another, that indicates that receiver is making that quarterback look better. And again, Travis is second highest in NFL passer rating when targeted at 140.7 per PFF, only behind Miami receiver Xavier Restrepo at 141.9. Again, very close. So even when you start to break down some more of those advanced metrics with receiving, Travis still holds up very well. So he's not just a target merchant. He's not just a junk volume merchant. He has been efficient. He has been dominating, and he has been the best receiver on a very good offensive team. So when breaking down Travis's defensive side of the ball, it's pretty hard to judge corners based off of stats. It's really a position that you actually have to watch film. You watch them play. Are they getting burned? Are they getting thrown to very often? I mean, you can track that, but there's no good stat because obviously, people are talking about his lack of tackles. That's not a good fucking stat for corners when you don't even want the ball thrown their way. So, the stat-wise, there are a few we'll go over, but it's kind of limited. One thing that I do like to use, and if you guys know PFF, they do a grading system for players and for different types of plays and stuff like that. So what I mean by like different types of plays is like, take offensive line, for example. They'll grade your overall blocking ability, your run blocking ability, and your pass blocking ability. So they'll actually watch every single snap every player takes and then formulate a grade for them. So obviously there is some subjectiveness going into this, but I don't use it as an all by means to, this isn't how I determine who the best players in the country are, but I do think it is a worthy tool just to look at. So when you're looking at Travis's coverage grade, so this is entire all pass coverage. He's number 1 out of all corners with at least 250 snaps in coverage grade. Now, I don't want to lead you guys on. I'm just trying to give out information. So I will say the 3 guys below him are extremely close in his grade. So Travis's coverage grade is a 90.9. 100's the highest you can go if you guys don't know. Cam Stone has a 90.8. Jediah Barron also has a 90.8. And the German McCoy has a 90.3. But my point still stands where Travis is one of those top 5 or so corners in the entire country this year. He has been phenomenal at coverage. And if you break down some of the actual stats that you can get from a corner, I was talking about earlier, passer rating. NFL passer rating is a tool that you can use for if a quarterback's passer rating goes up with a receiver, they're helping them out. If it goes down, the receiver is not. You can use the same thing with corners. So when Travis was targeted, quarterbacks had an NFL passer rating of only 42, which if you don't know, that is terrible. That goes for 8th best in the country among corners. So if he was passed to, they weren't successful. He was targeted 38 times. He allowed 22 catches for 205 yards. If you break that down, that's extremely good. And only 2 of those plays were above 20 yards. So basically, anytime that he was allowing catches or yards, a lot of it was dink and dimes, screens, slants, short routes. Which I'm not saying that as an elite corner, you have to guard those as well. But he wasn't giving up massive plays. He wasn't baiting quarterbacks for picks. He was truly being a shutdown corner. He had 4 interceptions, which only 5 guys had more than that. There was a handful of guys tied at 4, but only 5 had more than 4, showing he's also one of the best ball hawking corners. And if you've watched his picks, they are incredible catches. That's besides the point. So basically what I'm trying to say is, from all these people that were saying snaps aren't stats, he has been a top 5 receiver in college football. Even if some of those stats may be inflated from them trying to get the ball to him, which I don't think they are, but even if they are, he has still been effective and efficient in one of the best passing offenses in the country. And on the defensive side of the ball, even though Colorado's defense wasn't great, that was by no means his fault. He shut down receivers when he was playing them. It's just the rest of the defense, they could just focus on that. But Travis's goal was to shut down one side of the field, and he pretty much did that just as well as anyone in the country. And in the end, while yes, the Big 12 isn't an elite top to bottom conference, it is still better than the Mountain West where Gentry rides. They played more ranked teams. They played more competitive teams. Boise State played the best team out of both, and they almost beat them, which is phenomenal. It was awesome. I remember that game. But to just say that Colorado's strength of schedule has been nothing is definitely being a little biased. So again, one of the points of this video was to just give the resumes of both players so you can truly have a good place to compare. Because I'm sure like a lot of people, like me, you don't really see either in-depth analysis of these players or you just see people bashing the other one, not really building up one. So I wanted to give you guys stats, comparisons, so that you can either make a decision for yourself on who you think should win, or when you and your buddies are enjoying watching Army Navy on Saturday or watching the bowl games in a few weeks, the playoffs in a few weeks, and you guys, this conversation comes up, you can have a lot of stats to back up your argument if you disagree with one of your buddies. But in the end, I really do think this Heisman had true phenomenal candidates. I don't think that's the case every year. I'm not saying the previous Heisman winners didn't deserve it, but I think sometimes there are just very good seasons on great teams. This year we had two players who had great seasons. And I really do think either one could win a Heisman almost any other year. But in the end, I have to pick who I think should win the Heisman. So my choice is Ashton Jeanty. The reason I went Ashton is because I think he was single-handedly winning Boise State games. Now, Travis was, extremely important to winning games in Colorado. I'm not saying Colorado has the same amount of wins without him, but I think if you replace Ashton with an average college running back, or if you just replace him with a running back that Boise State would normally get, their wins get cut down from 12 to anywhere from like 6 or 7. They don't even come close to the playoffs. And I think, and part of this is just the unfairness to Hunter's positions, but obviously in the NFL, quarterbacks are the most important. They're the ones who carry offenses. In college, quarterbacks can do it, but so can running backs. I just think Jeanty comes at a position where he can put a team on his back and actually be the offense. And could Boise State throw more and be effective still? Probably, but they didn't need to. They had a generational running back who had one of the best college seasons we've ever seen. Best college season we've seen since Melvin Gordon. And Melvin Gordon arguably should have won the Heisman as well. And this is one of the best seasons we've seen since Barry Sanders as a whole. So I think both are extremely rewarding. I think Travis does win it, but I think Jeanty should. But both are extremely great candidates, and I think I won't be mad either way it happens.